I am fully aware that I deserve the harshest criticism for my actions. I made a grave mistake by betraying someone who loved me dearly and failed to appreciate the affection that was given to me. Although I understand that it is impossible to undo the damage I caused, I still find myself yearning to turn back time. For 5 years, I was married to Vlad, who loved me passionately and showered me with attention, care, and tenderness. Initially, I enjoyed being the center of his world, but gradually, I began taking his love for granted. Eventually, I became irritated by his constant doting, which I perceived as weakness on his part. Vlad was a gentleman in every sense of the word. He was always accommodating and selfless, and I began to view these qualities as shortcomings. Despite his unwavering commitment to me, I was not ready to start a family with him. I wanted to live for myself and was unsure if he was the man I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. After completing my training as a hairdresser, I gained experience working in affordable, budget-friendly salons. 2 years later, I landed a job at a prestigious salon located on the first floor of a hotel complex. It wasn't long before I struck up a friendship with the administrator and owner of the salon, a young woman named Jana, who was 2 years older than me. The salon was named after her, Jana. Despite her slender figure, Jana was an attractive person, with a bust large enough to catch anyone's attention. It was evident that she took great care of herself. Jana shared with me that she had been married twice before. The first marriage was a foolish mistake, and the second was a calculated move. Her second ex-husband was 25 years her senior, but he gave her an apartment, a car, the salon, and a lot of money. Jana changed lovers like she changed gloves, believing that men were only interested in one thing from women, sex. She claimed that men were not deserving of love and should only be used. As I spent more time with Jana, I found myself succumbing to her influence. I realized that life was precious and should be lived to the fullest. Vlad had started to lose my interest, and then Jeannie introduced me to her new romantic interest. The three of us dined at a restaurant in the hotel where he was staying during a business trip. Arthur was his name, and he began showing more interest in me, but Jeannie was not bothered by it. I fell under his spell, and we spent the night together in his hotel room. Now, I had to face the consequences of my actions and explain myself to my husband and my friend. I found an excuse for my husband, as this was not my first time being unfaithful. He forgave me once again due to his love for me. However, I was unsure of how Jeannie would react. I arrived at work expecting a confrontation or even dismissal, but Jean took it in stride. She explained that no man was worth losing her best friend over, and even encouraged me to pursue Arthur since she was already tired of him. The relationship with Arthur was progressing quickly, and I found myself falling deeply in love with him. Jean had been covering for me in front of Vlad, but when Arthur declared his love and intention to propose to me, I was faced with a difficult decision. Despite Arthur's ultimatum to not share me with anyone, including my husband, I needed time to figure things out. With Arthur leaving in a week, I knew I had to talk to Vlad and make a decision. However, I was unsure how to approach the situation. Leaving Vlad would have been easier if he were a terrible person, but he wasn't. I struggled with the idea of being labeled a traitor, but I also wanted a valid reason to leave him. I despised his perfection and longed for a real justification to end our marriage. Eventually, I turned to Jean for help and convinced her to seduce my husband. I knew that if Vlad cheated on me, it would give me the reason I needed to leave him for Arthur. Strangely enough, she had agreed and expressed her love for such adventures. However, the following day she returned, upset and angry. She confided in me that while no man could resist her charms, he had been different. He had stated his love for his wife, and it had made her question her actions. In response, she proposed a plan B. On his day off, I prepared a celebratory feast at our home, including a vast amount of alcohol, even though Vlad was not a heavy drinker. Jeannie was invited and discreetly added a potion to his glass, causing him to pass out. We then undressed him and placed him in our bed, where Jean undressed herself and lay beside him. I now regret this foolish act and am repulsed by it. To betray a loving husband and leave him with a burden of guilt is unacceptable. The following morning, I caught them in bed together and created a scene. My husband was confused and claimed he had no memory of the events, but I refused to listen. I packed my bags, left the apartment keys and wedding ring, and declared my intention to divorce him. I quit my job at the salon and left town. I played the role of the victim well, leaving my grief-stricken and guilt-ridden husband and a smug Jean behind. Upon my arrival at the hotel, I found Arthur waiting for me. 2 days later, we departed for his residence in Peter. Vlad and I quickly divorced since we had no children and no property to divide. Just a notice of divorce was sent to him. Life with Arthur was enjoyable for about a year. The first 2 months were magical, but then he transformed into a tyrant. He became jealous of almost every man, even though he pursued other women. I desired to have a child with him, but he compelled me to have an abortion. He prohibited me from communicating with anyone and prevented me from leaving the house. He did not propose to me formally for a long time, and he began to physically abuse me. Unlike Vlad, he was an extreme egomaniac. It dawned on me that my past actions were returning to haunt me, like a boomerang. Memories of my ex-husband flooded my mind, and I couldn't shake the guilt for the hurt and betrayal I caused him. My conscience weighed heavy on me, and I wept endlessly, reminiscing about the good times we shared. I tried reaching out to him and a mutual friend, Jean, but to no avail. The rejection was too much to bear, and I couldn't continue to endure it. I made the decision to leave Arthur and return to my ex-husband. When I told Arthur, he responded with a mocking laugh and said, "Good luck." He didn't try to stop me physically. Returning to the town where I once lived with my husband, I held on to the belief that Vlad still loved me and blamed himself for our separation. With a burning desire to make amends, apologize, and start over, I longed to see him again. However, upon calling the apartment we shared a year ago, I was met with a surprise. Instead of Vlad, the door was answered by a woman I could barely recognize as Jean. She no longer resembled the flighty, arrogant, and glamorous girl I once knew, now presenting as a modest and serious woman, dressed in a green blouse and denim sundress, who warmly welcomed me inside. Everything had changed since I left. The apartment had undergone Euro repairs, with new furniture and curtains, and the bedroom was now a nursery. Jean began to open up to me and shared that her first marriage, at only 17 years old, was a nightmare, with her abusive husband causing her to miscarry and lose the ability to have children. This trauma left her with the persona I once knew her to be. However, everything changed when Vlad came into her life. Jean spoke of Vlad as the only man in the world deserving of love and happiness, and expressed her disappointment that I had not appreciated him, ultimately causing such a rare and valuable gem to slip away. Though her greeting had initially been cold, Jean's words showed that she had found peace and happiness with Vlad, and I was left to reflect on the consequences of my actions. Tell me what happened on the day I stormed out of the apartment. Jean also left, but was unable to start the car or leave due to a road blockage. Suddenly, an unknown force pulled her back to the apartment, where she knocked and called for Vlad, but received no response. Her intuition told her that something terrible had happened, and she was proven right when I called EMERCOM and an ambulance. Vlad had attempted suicide by cutting his wrists in the bathroom, and had Jeannie not returned in time, he may not have survived. Vlad was taken to the hospital and received a blood transfusion. Jeannie stayed with him and eventually confessed her mistakes to him, asking for forgiveness and explaining that I had been unfaithful. She spent her days picking him up from the hospital and paying for psychologists to aid in his recovery. It was during this time that she discovered what true love was and worked hard to earn Vlad's forgiveness and love in return. She likened her efforts to collecting his broken heart and sacrificing her own happiness. Eventually, Jean discovered that she was pregnant with Vlad's child, which was a dream come true for her. When I asked her if she was pregnant with my husband's child, she responded that she was actually expecting a baby with her own husband. She proudly displayed her wedding ring and explained that they had immediately applied to the registry office upon learning of the pregnancy, getting married 6 months ago. She advised me that it was best for both Vlad and me to stay apart and urged me to forget about him. She even went as far as to say that she would harm herself if he were to return to me. As she expected her husband to come home soon, she suggested that I should leave and not see him, as it would not be good for the baby. After hearing her words, I felt so overwhelmed that I went outside and felt like I did not want to continue living. I started to blame those around me, including Gina, Arthur, and even Vlad, for finding solace so quickly. I even began to think that Gina had deliberately set me up with Arthur to take my husband away. Despite this, I still longed to speak with Vlad and ask for his forgiveness. I believe that he still loves me and that he only sought comfort with Gina.